Good evening and welcome to this month's Bloodaxe Books launch event for the 3 books we're publishing this month. My name is Neil Astley, I'm the editor of Bloodaxe Books, and I'm delighted to be able to present tonight Pascale Petit, Vidyan Ravinthiran, and we're also paying tribute to the late great Benjamin Zephaniah. Pascale Petit has just published this month her 9th collection called Beast, a book that takes you on journeys in France, the Amazon, and to Bodmin Moor, near where she now lives. She was born in Paris, and she is of French, Indian heritage. And the book relates to her family background and also to the climate catastrophes and so on. And Avidya Ravinthiran was born in Leeds of Sri Lankan Tamil parents. He's currently now living in Acton in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He teaches at Harvard. His new book is his 3rd collection called Avidya, and it relates also to journeys, a journey he took in 2017 to Sri Lanka, and the journey he took with his family across the Atlantic from Britain to America, arriving just as lockdown started. We're also paying tribute in our event to Benjamin Zephaniah, who sadly died of a brain tumour in December 2023. And Bloodaxe is publishing this month a retrospective of his work called This Poetry, Selected Poems and Lyrics. We'll hear more about that in shortly. But we're going to kick off the event with Benjamin himself reading or performing his poem, Dis Poetry. This was recorded at Live Theatre in Newcastle in 2009.
This poetry is like a rhythm that drops, the tongue brings a rhythm that shoots like a shot. This poetry is designed for ranting, dancehall style, big mouth chanting. This poetry won't put you to sleep saying, follow me like your blind sheep. This poetry is not party political, not designed for those who are critical. This poetry goes with me when I go to my bed. It gets into my dreadlocks and it lingers around my head. This poetry is with me when I am riding my bike. I have tried Shakespeare, respect Julia, but this is the stuff I like. This poetry is not afraid of going in a book, no, but this poetry needs ears to hear and eyes to have a look. Yes, this poetry is verbal rhythm, no big words involved, and if I have a problem, the rhythm gets it solved. I have tried to be romantic, it did no good for me. I take a reggae rhythm and build my poetry. I could try something personal, but you've heard it all before. No written words are needed because plenty words in store. This poetry is called Dub Rags, the tongue plays a beat and the body starts skanking. This poetry is quick and childish. This poetry is for the wise and foolish. Anybody can read for free. This poetry is for you and me. Don't stretch your imagination. This poetry is for the good of the nation. Chant in the morning, I chant in the night, I chant in the darkness and under the spotlight. I pass through university, I pass through sociology, and then I got a dread degree in dreadful ghettoology. This poetry is with me when I take a walk, and when I'm talking to myself in poetry I talk. This poetry is with me, below me, and above, you see. This poetry is from inside me and goes to you with love. Happy birthday.
And we'll hear more from Benjamin shortly. So we're going to start off the main part of the reading with Pascale Petit. Her new book is Beast, and I should have mentioned that she's actually of French, Welsh and Indian heritage, which comes into this book and others. So let's kick off now with Pascale. Oh, before we do kick off with Pascale, just a quick trigger warning. Some people may find her poem Skinner upsetting, and so when she says that she's about to read Skinner, you could mute if you don't want to be upset. Okay, Pascale.
Thank you very much, Neil. Hello, everyone. Thank you for publishing Beast, and to you and Pamela for such a striking cover. It's a real honor to launch with Vidyan, and I'm really looking forward to your reading. And of course, with Benjamin Zephaniah, Dis Poetry, what a manifesto that is. poetry for everyone. I totally agree. So Beast is in 5 parts, and the first one is the Amazon rainforest. So I'm going to read the opening poem of the book, which actually takes place in South Wales, but also in the Amazon rainforest. And all the creatures in this poem are ones I encountered on the Tambopata River in the Peruvian Amazon. The river started to flow when I was 13. It grew between me and my mother. I saw the jaguar bathe in the shallows. The caiman, with his crown of horseflies, accepted me as a friend. He led me to the swift center where nighthawks roosted on driftwood, raised their sleepy eyelids, and were not angered by my presence. They were forest dreaming as the current took me in its arms and whispered encouragement. My mother's chair seemed further away on the far bank, and I could no longer hear the words that stung. The river glittered with waves, and each was a picture I could paint or a book I could write. It was as if I'd entered a new element and could breathe water. My feet touched the bottom where stones told me their stories, and I listened. Capybaras barked a welcome, and even the cowbirds on their backs gurgled as they plucked botflies from their mounts. I plunged into the fertile world and swam to safety. I wrapped each wave around my neck like a shawl of sunlight. The anaconda swam with me, and every scale was a make-up mirror telling me I wasn't ugly. My brown eyes were not cowshit, but clean as the harpy eagles. Morphos drank my tears and fluttered on my lashes. Everywhere I looked, I saw my future was gilded blue. My black hair, mother had cropped to my scalp, grew into ringlets of vines on which jacamars and tanagers perched. Marmosets played in the coils and made me laugh. When I floated on my back, my breasts were 2 turtles drying their shells on a mud bank. And when the jaguar dived beneath me and lifted me up into the light, I clung to his back and rode my life. Another poem about my mother, through the sculpture by Rebecca Horn, the German artist. That installation, which was at Tate Modern, of this grand piano which she hung upside down from the ceiling. So I don't know if you've ever walked underneath it, but it was kinetic, and it would disgorge its keys and then tuck them back in. Concert for Motherhood. If I say my mother was a piano, I mean the grand in the children's home where I clung to one leg. I'm old enough now to raise the lid and look at the strings and hammers inside, the harp of her nerves, as I try to recall tunes she played to me when I was in her body. If I say my mother was a piano, I mean the way the keys would turn into shark's teeth with one twist, and the grand would be hanging from the ceiling, upside down, opening and closing its jaws, trying to tell me something that must never be set to music, something my cells remembered when they were brain coral, my hands, dead man's fingers. There are some poems about my father now. And so this location is Paris, and it's the amazing Cathedral Notre Dame, which I'm very fond of before it got burnt, and the amazing front of the cathedral, which has these incredible carvings of angels, apostles, and devils. Western facade. Scaffolding shrouds the western facade as my taxi passes Notre Dame. I have come to meet you again after 35 years, Papa. Men clean the limestone with brushes and lasers, millimeter by millimeter. Each time I come, more is revealed, as if they are working hard to make you clean, while you lie on your sick bed, gasping for breath, your lungs charred as the burnt rafters of a cathedral. I have thought of you every day of my life, you say. Your face, when you speak, shines like marble through the scaffold of your oxygen mask. Only after you die will I see your features clear, as if centuries of grime have been scrubbed from the colossus of your body, all history erased. So now back to the Amazon rainforest, and my father as a trophy hunter. Skinner. Pass me my skin, Papa says. This is my cue to open his wardrobe drawer and unfold the fur hide with butterfly motifs he calls his Tigre mariposa. He used to lay it on the bed and ask me to lie on it, my arms pinned out along the front paws, my legs along the spread-eagled back paws. Once upon a time, he begins, speaking in French, il était une fois, jaguars could fly. Then he shows me the bullet hole where the heart once beat and the thrumming starts. Fetch me that cigar box, he asks then, struggling to breathe, and I obey. By the time I reach him with the box, I'm a child again. I bring out the morpho butterfly inside, with eye spots under its wings like jaguar eyes in the night, and I glide through a sky so blue-black, Earth itself is an eye. I don't know what happens while I'm airborne, or where my father's trophy cat takes me, but when I return, there's always blood under my nails and around my mouth, my skin peeled off and folded in his drawer. And this is my last poem in this set, still in the rainforest. And everything that happens to this hummingbird are things that people have done to hummingbirds. Hummer. I think of the unspoken, his airless room. The words my father coaxed from his lungs with the help of oxygen. The suitcase I found on the shelf above his bed with its jars of mummified occupants. How I unwrapped the photo curled around each hummingbird couple like a sarcophagus, the smell of honey mixed with formaldehyde. And how, when I prized the male from the female, their throats glowed like embers just above slit chests. I saw it all then, a boy with his slingshot in the forest at dawn, his hands pinning the hummer's wings, the penknife slicing through its narrow breast, its tiny heart torn out, still beating, hot, on my father's tongue.
Thank you, Pascale. And we're now going to hear from Vidyan Ravinthiran, and he's going to be reading from his book, Avidya, another beautiful cover, and he'll be introducing it now. Vidyan.
Hello. I'd like to thank Neil and Pamela and Pete for all their work arranging this. And it is a real honor to be able to read with Pascale and miraculously kind of with Benjamin Zephaniah. That's something, if you told me when I was younger that would happen even in this way, I'd be absolutely amazed. I'm going to read 4 poems in this first set. And this first poem's called Burnt Palmyra. And it's one of a few poems in the book which touch on the Sri Lankan Civil War. During the Civil War, the government fired heavy weapons, shells, on not just the Tamil Tigers, the terrorists they were trying to eliminate, but on innocent Tamil civilians. And a lot of the evidence of this has been removed, but if you travel to the right places, you can see a landscape shaped by that artillery. And you can in particular see these trees burnt black with their tops blown off that have been left behind, kind of as evidence of what happened. And I wrote this dramatic monologue, really, because I was fascinated by those trees. Burnt Palmyra. Felling the other charred and telltale boles, turned black from brown and missing their crown, of leaves used to make baskets and hats, and as paper by the ancient poets, whose works burned with the rest of Jaffna Library. Those leaves that were turned into umbrellas as well, which may be why, when the shells came down on these now cratered lunar badlands, poor people hid beneath my boughs as if bombs might bounce off like rain. Why is it those who took an axe to all the scorched, lopped trees that would remember their crimes to the world, left me and me alone standing? The voiceless lingam you drive past down the tank-ruined road to the War Museum, with its spalled propeller and piffling homemade submarines, arranged to paint the tigers as a joke, where a troop of monkeys with a crash of leaves leap along rusted, pathetic bulkheads, drooping apart in slices like carved meat. This is prose poem called A Fisherman. A fisherman walks inchmeal like a child experimenting along the sand. His head is covered. There's a bag at his back, and the net hangs like a hammock between his readied hands. Is the sun, sea, sand a painted backdrop, shattering the simulation? Will he see the world as it really is? As a child, I cried, and when no one came, pretended that in the depths of my misery, with that eternal taste of tears in my mouth, I had discovered at the crucial moment, like someone on television, a flaw in the wallpaper, or a misaligned book on a shelf, a thread of some kind which, when pulled, would unravel everything. Your anger at acts of appropriation is itself appropriative. We wait and wait for the fisherman to throw his net, anticipating a glorious shot of its shape against the sky. The sky in brilliant turquoise panes. This is another prose poem, and it's called My Mother's English. It's entirely made out of adjectives. I think a lot of us absorbed a certain kind of workshop aesthetic, which, you know, one of whose rules is don't use too many adjectives. But I like adjectives. And I couldn't, you know, Pascale writes so powerfully, fearlessly, conceptually about her parents, about parenting, the relationships between parents and children. I'm drawn often to that subject. I find it quite difficult to put into words. My mother's probably my hero. I mean, I love him. I'm close to my dad too, but I think my mother's probably one of the greatest people who's ever existed in any epoch or civilization. I'm only half joking. My mother's English. My mother's English, rivering, glitch-thronged, dubitable, prodromal, galleonic, far-quarried, innocent of subtlety, narrow-casting, plethoric, spry, oysterish, unalleviated, pardonable, spicy, specious, spacious, toothless, literally, a biggish onslaught, a glassy envelope, heuristic, sanative, double-natured, word incarcerated, burdensome, trophic, conciliatory, upended, bullied, marginal, bellied, managerial, belayed, belied, believed, beloved. And finally, in this section, I'll read a poem called Pilayar, and it's about the great epic, the Mahabharata, and one of the myths of its composition. Pilayar, that's Ganesh to you, is pictured with a broken tusk. Why? The tale was added late on to the Mahabharata. Vyasa, author, requiring a scribe, asked that noble child with an elephant's head. Only, replied the god, if once begun we do not cease, my pen mustn't rise from the page. So the poem became difficult. Vyasa improvised knotty passages. Pilayar had to pause and pass, while he, Vyasa, also took a breath. When the pen broke, Vyasa, as promised, kept unrolling that wonderfully embroidered carpet of verse. The elephant god had no choice. He snapped off his tusk, dipped the end in ink, and wrote with that. Since then, all writing everywhere has this character. It can't decide whether to speed up or slow down. It wants you to understand. Then it plays hide and seek. There are two people here, even before you arrive, playing tug of war. Impulse and form, breath and language. And since the pen is a torn-out tooth, read between the lines, you'll taste blood. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidyan. And now we're going to head back to Newcastle's Live Theatre, 2009, and we're going to hear Benjamin Zephaniah performing his poem, Money.
It's called Money. Well, keep it simple. Money make a rich man feel like a big man. It make a poor man feel like a hooligan. A one-parent family feel like a ruffian, and those who have it won't give you anything. Money makes your friend become your enemy. You start seeing things very superficially. Your life is lived very artificially, unlike those who live in poverty. Money inflates your ego, but money brings you down. Money causes problems. Anyway, money is found. Food is what we need. Food is necessary. Let me grow my food and then can eat their money. Money makes a singer sing a load of crap. Money keeps horses running round the track. Money makes marriages, and money makes divorce, and money makes a student think about the course. Money makes commercials, and commercials make money, and if you don't have money, you just watch more TV. Money can save us, but yet we feel doomed. Plenty of money burns in a nuclear mushroom. Money can't make you happy. Money can't help you when you die, and those who have it continue while you live a lie. Children are dying, spies are spying, refugees are fleeing, politicians are lying, and deals are done, and webs are spun. Loans keep the third world on the run, and this brother feels better than the brother next door, because this brother's got money, and this brother's got more, and this brother thinks that brother's not a brother because he's poor when the brother kills the other. That is economic war. Economic war, we call it economic war. It may not be the East and the West anymore, but the North and the South, third world, far out. Coffee and oil, that's what it's about. Economic war, shots fired from the stock market floor, so we work for a living, how we try and we try, with so little time for chilling like we're living a lie. Money makes a dream become reality. Money makes real life like a fantasy. Money has a habit of going to the head. I have some for a rainy day underneath my bed. Money problems make it hard to relax. Money makes it difficult to get down to the facts. Money makes you worship vanity and lies. Money is a drug with legal eyes. Economists come, economists go. You try controlling your cash flow. Food costs loads and you just can't score. And the rich people try to dress like the poor. Nobody really understands the interest rate. When there is interest, then it's all too late. We cherish education, but how much do you pay? You can't buy race relations or the father holiday. Money can make you happy. Money can help you when you die. And those who have it continually live a lie and know them say, it's money culture time, money culture them, not yours or mine. Money culture who? Money culture what? Money culture fries where love is not. Then can buy and sell until they go to hell. Then can tax the wisher at the wishing well. No Frankenstein come to privatize. Empire fools get penny wise. Every government will take what they can get. Every government is quick to forget. Every government can make money by killing. Every government loves money, no kidding. But money is paper. Paper will burn. So think about trees as you earn. It could do good, but it does more bad. Money is fake and we've been had. Some study how to manage it. Some study how to spend it. Some people just cannot comprehend it. Some study how to move it from one country to another. Some study how to study it and them study forever. Some people never see it and then work hard. Others never see it, them just carry cards. Some people grab it without no thanks and then let it pile up in high street banks. Money inflates your ego, but money brings you down. Money causes problems. Anyway, money is found. Food is what we need. Food is necessary. Let me grow my food and then can eat the money because parents are hoping. Some are not hoping. Some are just managing books, need balancing property is fair. No money means death. You pay for your rent and then nothing left. Some will pick a pocket. Some appear to stop it. Those who appear to stop it, they're happy because they got it. Some go out and fight for it, some claim they have the right to it, and people like my grandparents live long, but never sight it. Money made me go out and rob, then it made me go looking for a job. Money made the nurse and the doctor immigrate. Money buys friends you love to hate. Money made slavery seem alright. Money brought the Bible, and the Bible shone the light. Victory to the penniless at grassroots sources. We come to match down market forces. That paper giant called market forces.
Well, that was Benjamin Zephaniah performing his poem Money, very relevant poem for now, and showing what a supreme performer he was of his work. So we're now going to turn to Pascale Petit for her second set. Pascale.
Hi. So I'm going to read one more poem about my father, and then there'll be other poems. So this is the Lammergeier daughter. And of course, the Lammergeiers, I'm sure you know, but they are the vultures that can eat the long, big bones of the carcass. The Lammergeier daughter. That night, I opened your wardrobe and found a trophy of vultures, their necks pierced by hanger hooks. I saw at once that you hunted everything I loved, the griffin, the Himalayan, the lammergeier, who haunted our home with wheeling cries. I peeled off my skin then and robed myself as a bird bride. Veiled in morning mist, I married the sky. Of course, you aimed at my heart, but as the bullet tore through me, I wrapped my talons around your skull, lifted you high, and dropped you as a lamb drops newborn from his mother onto the snow-fleeced earth. I landed beside you on the quilt, and when the flesh-eaters had done their work, it was I, your lammergeier daughter, who devoured your bones. Look, Father, how they slide down my throat like rifles. So that was set in the Languedoc in south of France, and I promise that there will be a couple of happier poems. So the next one is about the best dress I've ever owned. And I have to confess that I stole it from my mother, and she called it her peasant dress from Provence. My mother's Provençal dress. When I was 18, I stole my mother's Provençal dress while she was in hospital and walked into the art school canteen wearing the wood that grew over our vineyard, the overgrown paradise she had bought so we could be together every summer holiday. Interlaced branches of kermes and pubescent oaks. How I love your moss and grape gathers, your stitching like a hidden brook, the shoulder straps like garden bridges over to the reeds and rushes patch. You could almost hear the cicada thrum threaded round my waist. The quilted brocade panels over my breasts and around the full hem splashed sunlight over me as I entered the studio in a Librium haze. Cornflowers and poppies, Adonis blue butterflies blessed my body as I stood in the corridor, and my mood rose and fell like the lift. And when evening came, the tree crickets began their whispers from the fig tree. If I tell you the hottest third-year painter asked me out, you might forgive me that I didn't return her dress. After that first date when I stayed out too late and was punished, I wore it every day until it began to tear. I invisibly mended each leaf. My needle was an adder flashing in and out of the undergrowth. Even then, when Maman had come home, I hid her dress in the secret pocket of my bag under pills and forbidden makeup, and changed in the Cardiff station toilets on my way to college, and took it off on my way back, along with my mascara and dog rose lipstick. I sat, as I was told, on the edge of Maman's bed and said I was evil over and over until she was satisfied and let me leave. She didn't know I was a thief, though she accused me but had no proof. At night, I'd listen to the vines drinking oxygen, turning water to wine, and I'd call the shy, ocellated lizard who has sky blue eyes along his flanks that witness everything. I coaxed him from his rock to watch over me. So I'm going to end this set with one last South of France poem, and it's, I just got to find it. Oh, it's not there. So it's in the Camargue, and it's called Bac du Sauvage. Bac du Sauvage means the ferry in the wild swamps. So it's a really untamable part of the Camargue. And so I hope it's a poem with some hope. And it features European bee eaters and a very magical late afternoon when I was there. And there they were. And the French also call the bee eaters guêpiers, wasp eaters. Bac du Sauvage. Not the ferry itself across the Petit Rhone, nor the narrow road between the river and the canal through marsh leading to it, not the low power lines like bunting along one side, with songbirds silhouetted against the sun on this savage land, not even when, if we stared at them long enough, their colours would reveal them to be bee-eaters, scanning the sky for insects. Not how, when we reached the barge, we turned back to be on the right side of the road, closer to them, as if we could catch our lives in our mouths as easily as they snatched wasps in their flight, as if we could stop the car and snap them up with our camera, take their quintessence home, then peer at the shots for glints of us in their red eyes. No, not even how beautiful we could be in chestnut, gold, and turquoise raiment, reflecting tints of the atlas as we migrate across the hungry globe. What if we could rub all the world's harms from the air as they do, dash hornets' tails against the post until their stings break off?
Thank you very much, Pascale. And now we're going to hear again from Vidyan.
Again, so I'll read another 4 poems, and these first 2 poems are sort of inspired by kind of canonical historical poetry. It's one way of putting it, like first a poem by the romantic poet John Keats, and then a poem by the metaphysical poet Andrew Marvell. And the first poem, the Keats poem, is called Autumn, and it's inspired by Keats's poem, his ode to autumn. And the academic debate around that poem, which I'll try and summarize in a way that isn't really boring, has often been, this was a time of governmental clampdown on protest. The Peterloo massacre, which led to the founding of The Guardian, people were protesting for greater suffrage, and the government sent the soldiery in, and they ran through the protesters and killed lots of them. And critics have said, Keats should have been writing about that. He should have been doing the equivalent of angrily tweeting about what was going on. So why did he write this beautiful poem about autumn instead? And I've often felt that that's kind of harsh on Keats. And so it interests me, the ways in which we expect poets to speak out about things. So this poem's called Autumn, after John Keats. The fallen yellow leaves now oftener flare red. Embers, blown up chili flakes. The burning of the library at Jaffna. Foreign dead about to break the spell of here and now. Phantasms steal into the peaceful lives we seem to have earned, telling tales about what happened to them, not us, and in a tongue I never learned. This is my garden, my spade of blood meal, and from our kitchen the time-travelling smell of chicken curry floats to Walden Pond. A swooping cardinal like a struck match. Above the fence, mosquitoes eddy like a pinion, crazed by a patch of red-pink light into a giddy scribbling on the air. There is no need to be ashamed. I see you there and keep alive the thought of meeting one day, brightly after the next. Black mustard seed thrums in the sauce. The sky falls asleep. Where feelings come from or may leap across and through and to, no one can say. Tsunami hit, shoved over at a tilt. They've left the bashed old Coville's god-thronged tower, standing, tallish, beyond the new one built, to face this time, becalm the ocean's power. Our autumn clouds are a far-quarried rubble to which the changing light does spicy things. To sing, to fly, migrate are curious verbs. Beauty, like happiness, frailly reliable, has nothing to do with why there are wings, why birds build nests and sing their songs, or why barbed wires besotted with its barbs. In this poem, the Marvell poem is called Morning, and besides being a sort of, echo of Marvell's poem, it's about traveling in Sri Lanka. We met with a group of Tamil mothers who were seeking some sort of news from the government about their children who'd gone missing during the Civil War. And in some cases, what they wanted was what you would think of as bad news. They just wanted to know once and for all that their children were dead and not still stuck in a holding camp, because they just wanted an end to that kind of endless suspense, not knowing the truth about their loved ones. So it's called Mourning. What is the meaning of the tears those mourning women in their shack cried or didn't for lost these years, their children who did not come back? Grief unbegun and without end. Sri Lanka's a peculiar shape. War-torn in two, it has remained a single teardrop on the map. Erlam, island within island, that no explosion could break free. The sea foam mingles with the sand. The banyan's roots become the tree. Unknowing is the utmost hell. Did her child die, or flee abroad, or is he tortured in a cell? A mother's grief has been outlawed. For how can she convey the news to herself that her child is dead? Hope being a bomb she can't diffuse. Her left wrist wears the sacred thread. Capsules on strings around their necks, cyanide in case of capture. Some longed to blow themselves up next, in lonely yet collective rapture. The tears we cry, once separate, become reciprocal. A sea planes fly across. Some emigrate. My parents did, who made me me. But I'm them, too. They could not purge that terror passed down like a gene. Our histories can't but converge, for with a touch our griefs convene. My mother's gifts of fear and dread, as if some power still wants me dead, wrote the meaning of a woman's pain into these tears I can't restrain. And two more poems. This is a poem. It's called Sri Lanka, but it's really about the pandemic. And as Neil said, my wife and I and our child, we moved to the US in January 2020, right before the pandemic hit and the travel ban, and my parents couldn't see their grandchild and Vestry. I wrote this poem. Sri Lanka is every country where I feel and don't feel at home. A child leaving England for Colombo's eerily warm evenings and the alien language of crickets. I too was fostered alike by beauty and by fear. For many a year, through the doorway of dusk, I travel there. What's wrong, someone might say, or I love to see you smile, but I was far away. In lockdown with my wife and baby, in green Acton's twilight warmth, I'm that lonely boy listening for crickets on a pink-tiled rooftop in Dehiwala. What of this country, where I live now? But should I leave, if, say, the virus touches my parents in England, my visa may bar our return. Out of caves in our garden's stone wall peeps the immortal squirrel I saw run through ancient Polonnaruwa. 3 white lines burned into its back, the finger marks of Rama. One final poem. This is about, again, traveling in Sri Lanka with my parents and going to the temples where their parents used to go. My face in the coffin-shaped hotel mirror disquiets me now we returned from the temple, where my mother knelt and prayed and rose so many times, circling the crow-wild building, while faces dark as ours looked on. Everything, she said, to reassure this painted face in the mirror, will happen to you. The priest's thumb anointed my brow with thiruneera and sandalwood. A horse with an overt penis leaped from the load-bearing pillar of that Kali Kovil with Kalis everywhere, her paunch bulbous, teeth fangs, morphed to a sinuous dancing girl, bent backwards on reversed hands and feet, scuttling along the ceiling like a Klein blue spider. Unless I tell you otherwise, I am always tearing with my nail at the skin of my keratinized thumb, leaving panels of woe-begone cerise. My grandfather's gravestone is lost. Everything is gone, but he was never there. Tomorrow you will find him in his Sivan temple. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vidyan. Before we hear again from Benjamin Zephaniah, I'd just like to say a few words about the book we're just publishing now, Disc Poetry, Selected Poems and Lyrics. It was actually published on April the 15th, which would have been his 67th birthday. And 2 days before that, Brunel University, where he taught for many years, had a Benjamin Zephaniah Day in the newly named Benjamin Zephaniah Square and celebrated Benjamin in various ways. It's hosted by his widow, Chen Zephaniah. It's a remarkable event. Now, I first met Benjamin in 1991. I just published a book by Linton Kwesi Johnson, and he gave a performance at Newcastle Arts Centre. And at the end of it, I went up to him and asked him whether he had a new book of poems, because he had had a book out from the Arena imprint of Hutchinson called The Dread Affair, but it had sold out and they hadn't reprinted it. And clearly, in the reading that he gave in Newcastle, he was doing a lot more poems which hadn't been in that book. So he was interested, and we kept in touch. And then in 1992, Bloodaxe published City Psalms, the first book we did of his. And that was followed by Proper Propaganda in 1996, and then Too Black, Too Strong in 2001. While we were publishing these books of his, he was also moving out into other fields. He was publishing poetry for children. He was writing novels for younger readers, and he was doing all kinds of things that people know about from TV and everything. He was multi-talented artist. He was doing all these things. And people tended to think that he hadn't actually been writing more poems. But what he'd done is actually changed over his mode of performing. He'd actually combined music much more with his poetry. And he had a couple of CDs that came out, 2004, Naked, and then 2017, Revolutionary Minds. So in putting together his work for this poetry, what I've done is I've taken the best of the poems from The Dread Affair, and then all the poems from the three Bloodaxe volumes, and then I put into print a lot of the lyrics to those later poems, which have only been really on those CDs, or people have heard them when he's been giving performances. So that's broadly the remit of the book. The other aspect of the book is the film To Do With Me. In 1990, sorry, in 2013, Bloodaxe published this film and book, To Do With Me, Benjamin Zephaniah, filmed live and direct by Pamela Robertson-Pearce. Now, we'd started working with Benjamin on this film. The live theatre readings that you saw during this event, they were among the first recordings that were made for the film. And in the course of 4 years, Pamela filmed Benjamin in all kinds of different places. He would get in touch and say, I'm doing such and such an event in this festival, or I'm doing this thing. Do come along and film and come to my house and we can film some interviews. And at one point, Pamela said, well, the one thing that's missing really is your mother, who's so important to your work. And so Benjamin even arranged for us to go and film him with his mother in Birmingham, which was marvelous. So this compilation has got 18 poems in it, which he's performed on that film. And at the back of the book, we have the DVD where you could watch the film. I mean, the film was shown also at the Benjamin Zephaniah Day at Brunel University last week. But really, because of the unavailability of DVDs now, and people don't have DVD players, they don't have DVD slots in computers, we thought the best thing to do was actually to put the whole film online. And now, if you get the book, if you get Disc Poetry, you just need to turn to that page, and then you see QR code, you click on that, and then while you are reading the book, you get the whole film. It's a whole feature film. But what we've got for you in this event is an 8-minute trailer giving you some choice snippets from the film, which has been available on our website for some time, but people haven't had access to the whole film. And so that's one of the great things we're doing with Disc Poetry, is you don't only get all of Benjamin's work, you get Pamela Robertson-Pearce's amazing film. So we're now going to move into a sampler from her film, To Do With Me.
This is me, naked, unclothed, undressed, under the light of all the gods you dare imagine, waiting to be touched with as many versions of the truth as you can conjure up in your turned off mind. This is me. Give me your fury, give me your opinion, give me your truth, give me your big bad holy book. For it is written in the great book of multiculturalism that the curry will blend with the shepherd's pie and the Afro hairstyle will return. Now let me hear you say multiculture. Multiculture. Amen. Let me hear you say roti roti. Roti roti. Hey women, I may not get there with you, my friend, but I have seen that time, and as an equal opportunities poet, it pleases me to give you this opportunity to share my vision of hope, and I just hope that you can cope with a future as black as this. Be nice to your turkeys this Christmas, because turkeys just want to have fun. Turkeys are cool and turkeys are wicked, and every turkey has a mom. Be nice to your turkey this Christmas. Don't eat it, keep it alive. It could be your mate and not on your plate. Say, yow turkey, I'm on your side. And, you know, I'll be really honest with you. I have been bullied, and I have been a bully. You know, so why was I a bully? Because I hung out with some friends who were bullies. And so to fit in, you know, I had to go along with them. When I started thinking for myself, I realized, what am I doing? Especially after I was bullied. I went to a school once where I was the only black kid. Yeah, I was bullied by the kids and I was bullied by the teachers. Could you imagine? There was nowhere to go. And I'd go home to my parents and they'd say, you know, son, we are guests in this country, it's just what we got to put up with. when you're with people who are doing criminal activity, it takes over. So we go into the bull ring and we are looking at how people are carrying their bags and their wallets. That's what we're looking for, you know. And strange enough, it's still a habit I got today. The other day I was on an escalator and a woman was standing in front of me with a bag and I took her purse.
You did what?
No, listen, I took her purse and then I tapped her on the shoulder and gave her it back. Because she'd left it, I wanted to show her.
Yeah. The danger.
Because women do that a lot, you know, they put a bag on there and they put the purse in the bag.
Yes, they do it in town as well.
And so I just took it and and she was like, "Oh my God!" And you gave me back, and I said, "Well, yeah, you know, I don't need to steal." And I just want to show you how easy it was.
Yeah, it is to pinch your purse.
To steal.
Yeah.
So we would go around and we'd say, "Yeah, I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that. I'm going to do that." And pickpocketing, we used to just it took over. I mean, one thing I got to tell you is that when I got kicked out of school, this teacher said to me, he said, "You are going to end up dead or doing a life sentence." That's what she said to me. Could you imagine that? What effect that had upon my juvenile mind? I'm going to end up dead or doing a life sentence. And I thought about it. And I thought, you know, how could you say that to me? How could you say that to me? She said, "You are a born failure."
I thought my neighbors formed the axis of evil. I want to go kill people. I've been listening to the wrong radio station. Hey, I was sure I didn't inhale, so why is my mind going stale? I've been listening to the wrong radio station. I was beginning to believe that all Muslims are terrorists. I just could not see what was wrong with me. I gave hungry people hamburgers, you see. I was beginning to believe that our children were better than their children. Their children were dying from terrorism, but I couldn't hear their children call. And a child from Palestine simply didn't count at all. What despair! No children, I was not aware. I have been listening to the wrong radio station. Wake up from your sleep. Wake up from your sleep.
Money make a rich man feel like a big man. It make a poor man feel like a hooligan. A one-parent family feel like a ruffian, and those who have it won't give you anything. Money makes your friend become your enemy. You start seeing things very superficially. Your life is lived very artificially, unlike those who live in poverty. And this brother feels better than the brother next door because this brother's got money and this brother's got more. And this brother thinks that brother's not a brother because he's poor when the brother kills the other. That is economic war. Economic war. This poetry is like a rhythm that drops. The tongue brings a rhythm that shoots like a shot. This poetry is designed for ranting, dancehall style, big mouth chanting. This poetry won't put you to sleep saying, "Follow me like your blind sheep."
It's like me, I'm outspoken. I
are.
have no fear of nobody.
I know.
Do you remember this? We went to a funeral and Mum went up and she did her bit. And it was like poetry. And there was some of me in there, and he came down, and I said something like,
Was it Clarice's son's funeral?
I think so, and I said something like, "Mum, God, you really sounded like me," and you went, "No, you sound like me."
Yeah, that's
Do you remember?
Right. Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, because I think in a way,
It's true,
I think he's like me in a lot of ways, even though he's a boy.
Yeah.
Because girls usually like their mum more and boys like their dad, but I think he's like me a lot.
And Bob Marley was a great inspiration to me because in the early 70s, I wrote a letter to him and he replied with a handwritten letter. In fact, I wrote a letter and sent him some poems, and it was just like, you know, I'm a poet in England and I just want you to look at these poems and tell me what you think of them. Something that people do to me now all the time. And he sent me back a handwritten letter that just said something as simple as keep going, I love your poetry. And he said, Britain needs you. And I remember that, Britain needs you. You've got to keep doing this. And I thought, right, if he's given me his approval, then I'm going to keep doing it. And it was a great inspiration. And that's why now, when people write me letters, I try and answer all of them. Because if I know how much that reply from Bob Marley meant to me. Things are getting tight, you know, and I get to a point where it gets really serious. Some of my friends got in trouble in a bad way, so they got really long sentences. A couple of my other friends ended up being shot. And I ended up kind of sleeping with a handgun underneath my pillow. And I remember thinking about that teacher saying that I'm going to end up dead or doing a life sentence. And then seeing some of my friends ending up dead and doing life sentences. And I just thought, I've got to prove my teacher wrong. I've got to do something about this. And I woke up one day and just said, that's it. I don't want to do this anymore.
Black people no run away. We have to stand and fight for another day. My people no run away. We have to stand and fight them anywhere. Them have a little power and know them want devour the disabled, single parents and the blacks. Them say them spending money in a bid to make you happy, but the truth is that you just cannot relax.
Welcome everyone back. We're now going to be joined by Pascale and Vidyan. Vidyan?
Yes,
Pascale, you all here?
Hi.
Right. No, hang on. Yes, here I am. Sorry, a bit confused by the new layout on the Zoom. Yes, as you can see, I've had a quick change to celebrate Benjamin T-shirt. All proceeds from sales of the T-shirt at Brunel go to Benjamin's causes, and the various causes were well represented at Benjamin Zephaniah Day. Just a few more words about the book and the film. The trailer you saw just had snippets in it, but the film, you get 18 complete poems. So unlike some films where you just get snippets, like in the trailer, you don't get the whole poem. You actually get the whole poem for 18 of the poems, all done different ways, as you've seen from the trailer, different treatments, performances in different places. On the trailer there, you saw him performing at Brunel and also Ledbury Poetry Festival. There's also the performances he gave at Newcastle Live Theatre and so on. And Pamela was able to film him in different places all around the country, which was a wonderful experience. And to say, it took 4 years to put the film together. So it's great to have this opportunity to give the film a further showing through the book. And for people who read the book now on the page to actually be able to hear Benjamin and see him actually performing those poems in his inimitable way. So before we turn to Pascale and Vidyan, I wonder if you have any thoughts on Benjamin as a poet in our time. Vidyan?
yeah, I'm happy to go. I think that man is a legend. Like, I think that, well, I mean, maybe because I'll speak as the academic and as I speak out against, poetry factionalism and snobbery. I think that poetry can contain all sorts of different kinds of poetry. And I think that he's wonderful. He's a wonderful crafts person, really. It's a different kind of craft to the kind of craft that's often exalted by people who talk all the time about craft. But, his poems mean a lot to me. My first Bloodaxe collection, I had a poem which at the time I thought was great, so riffing on his angry black poet poem, I wrote a zany white poet poem called The Zany White Poet, and he's always been a very important writer to me. Fen gave me a copy of his poetry when I was a teenager. I love that clip of him with his mum. I love the line break, really. He says, the woman in the bull ring, I took her bag. Line break. I thought it was brilliant. I think that he could have been a wonderful professor of poetry at Oxford. I think that's mentioned on the back of the Bloodaxe book, isn't it? But that possibility.
Mm. And timing was the thing about him. I mean, he's just had wonderful timing as well as the extraordinary memory. And the ability to change the poems whenever in order to respond to issues of the time. So when you actually look at the different recordings, often you find differences each time. He would be revising and changing them all the time.
Yeah.
Yes. I think what's extraordinary about him is that he came from this situation where his teacher predicted that he was going to end up dead or doing a life sentence, and was a born failure. And not only is he a wonderful, charismatic performer, but he is also, as Vidyan says, very crafted, and the timing is incredible. So I think he's an amazing example to, especially to young people, that you can actually change your life and that you can make it happy, and that you can make happy art from trauma or from unhappy situations. So that poem, Dis Poetry, when he reads it, it reminds me of the Navajo chant, the war god's horse song, the rhythm and tone of the chant. When he says in the night, this poetry is below me and above, it sounds very much like the chant of before me peaceful, behind me peaceful, under me peaceful, over me peaceful. So I think he's kind of taken the oral tradition and made something really special with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the oral tradition he's writing from and creating something totally new, isn't he? I mean, as a publisher, I'm always interested in publishing as wide a range of poetry as I can from across poetry. And so, on the one hand, I'm very proud that I published Benjamin Zephaniah, but equally, I publish sort of complex academic poets like J.H. Prynne, because they're all part of poetry, and I think it's very important to give readers access to all the different styles and kinds of poetry. And one interesting thing I found latterly talking to people who teach creative writing is a lot of students now are coming to creative writing from performance. They're starting off as performers and then they're getting interested in crafting their work. And that was one of the things that Benjamin was superb at Brunel, was actually helping to teach performance as well as poetry itself, because it's all about communication, it's all about voice, and all those things he was able to teach. And the film actually includes one of his poems, "This Policeman is Kicking Me to Death," performed in a lecture theatre at Brunel, to the students, to kind of give them a how-to guide and to how to read that kind of material in that very live and electric way. It's quite stunning. Well, so we've talked a bit about Benjamin. I think we should talk a bit about your books now. Both of your books relate to journeys in many ways, and I was wondering about how conscious you were in when you were writing those books, in making the journeys, and how much the journeys were feeding the books, and how much the book was feeding the journey. I know, Pascale, in the case of your book, you draw upon your journeys to the Amazon and then to the limestone course in France and to Languedoc. But also, when you'd got that far and you'd got that part of the collection assembled, you wanted to go to the Camargue because you felt, I think, that there was some missing part that only the Camargue would summon. Plus, very nearby you, there was Bodmin Moor. And I was wondering whether you could talk about, first of all, how journeys inspire you and how two-way that is.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, I think when I was a child, I was moved from country to country and person to person. And so in a way, that kind of journeying process is inherent to me. However, I'm also I really love home. So I love being home here. But I say home, but the problem is that I don't actually feel that I have a home. So, uh, So I think I search for making a home in my imagination and making it very real. And I learned how to do that when I lived with my mother when I was a teenager for 5 years, and to escape from her because she was very mentally ill, and it wasn't a good time for me. I would, I would make art in my head and go elsewhere. So there's that need to make a world very real. And then when I did go to the Amazon rainforest, I discovered that the world just unfolded and in incredible detail. And I just totally fell in love with it. And I fell in love with the natural world and the wild, and especially the wild that is least touched by humans. I think that to me that had a special appeal. And so in a way, my writing about other places is a search for a home, but it's also trying to write. I do feel a need to write about Earth as our home planet, and I have this horrible feeling that the wild and animals and forests are vanishing. And so I have this compulsive need to try and recreate them and record them in my poems, as well as try to change my original childish home.
Vidyan, journeys and home are also focal points for your work, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I made this trip with my parents in 2017, and was for the first time able to go to the places in the north of Sri Lanka where they grew up, because I'd been to Sri Lanka many times previously, but we'd always stayed in the south, like in the sort of more touristic region. And my parents had never felt it was safe to actually revisit Trincomalee and Batticaloa, which is where they grew up. And they're the two towns which, I'm trying to remember the statistic, had the largest number of widowed families, I think is the phrase that's used, come the end of the war. So being on that trip with them, seeing these things, that was a few years ago now. So there's been time for it to settle in my mind. And I felt I did have a Sri Lanka book in me, but it became not just a Sri Lanka book because of my wife and I and our son moving from the UK to the US. So it became this book, maybe a bit about migration in different senses too.
You
So,
also, you also co-edited Out of Sri Lanka, the anthology that came out 2 years ago, and I was wondering whether that had sparked off a lot of these new poems.
yes, definitely. So with Shash Trivet and Seni Sanivaratni, I helped co-edit this anthology of Sri Lankan poetry, and that was it was a pandemic project, because in a way, Seni and Shash were kind of standing in for the family I couldn't see in England, because we meet every week on Zoom to talk about our progress with a book. And there's a lot of things about talking to Shash and seeing Shash's face on the screen, which would remind me of, Sri Lankan Tamils and my relatives and stuff like that. But also Seni and Seni's accent, it remind me of growing up in the north of England, and, the other side of my extended family there. So yeah, even the way that book was put together became a kind of inspiration. I did feel like one thing we were able to do with your help, Neil, was to have the same Sri Lankan artist provide artworks for the cover of that Bloodaxe book and also for the cover of this Bloodaxe book, which is just beautiful. So I'm very pleased about that too.
Pascale, I was wondering whether you could say something about how you write about difficult subjects through metaphor.
Mm, mm. Yes, I love metaphor. And I started out as a sculptor. So my whole education was in the fine arts as a practicing artist. So in the end, I found that rather than working with materials, that I was finding it a bit easier to remake my worlds with metaphor and images. So I think that also what I said before about that need to make my created worlds really physical and present and real enough to be a kind of refuge. So
But is it a kind of shield against the rawness of that experience in the course of writing?
yes, it's a shield in that it's not just a shield. It is a shield, but it's also because I need to distance myself from the material. But it's also, I write so much about animals, and I wrote about my mother as a flower in the Amazon rainforest, and by turning what I think of as, as bad parents into creatures that I love, it
Mm.
completely changes.
Becomes a kind of enabling process.
Totally changed how I felt about her, because there was a book where I actually loved her, which was a special thing to happen for me. So, talking of creatures, my cat is making lots of noise.
Vidyan, in your case, you've had a very different family experience, haven't you? One which has been very positive, but also one which is also related to the all the issues of immigration and the difficulty of assimilation and all those areas as well.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a very loving but also very anxious family. So part of the book is about what I want to pass down of that to my son and what I don't want to. I mean, this is very much on my mind right now because my parents are actually visiting. They're not in the house right now, so they can't hear me, but they will watch this later. And it's the nature of anxiety. And I've actually come to realize, I have an OCD diagnosis now, and I see a lot of OCD in my mother as well. And an OCD is something which can be inflamed, exacerbated, or which can be set off or triggered by, trauma or particular events. And I think a lot about my mother, growing up, my mother would often send me or my sister back in to check the hobbles off, lots and lots of things like that. This kind of uncertainty about, is this place safe? Stuff like that. So some of that got into the book too. I suppose what I realized is that one can't keep the anxiety entirely from permeating the child, especially when, my son is absorbing this anxiety in our times of polycrisis from all sorts of other sources too. So I'm trying to be a bit kinder to myself about, being anxious in front of him with passing these things.
Now, you've both read each other's books, and I was wondering whether there's anything you'd like to ask each other or say to each other about your collections.
Well, there was a thing. Oh, sorry. Leaping in. I guess because deep down I'm a sort of poetry critic, and I thought I'm really interested. I was thinking of the poem. Well, I read it as an ecological poem, and it was about all these natural phenomena just shrinking down to, say, something to the pelt of an animal in the zoo. And I'm probably remembering it quite poorly. But it suddenly came to my mind when you were talking just now about recreating this world inside one's imagination. I started to think that maybe I misread that poem because maybe it is an ecological poem, but it's also about something else, this kind of imaginative recreation.
No, I think that poem is for me. I mean, I never know what my poems are about, to be honest. People tell me afterwards, but that poem really is about the horror, really, of the idea of these amazing animals vanishing.
Yeah.
And so it is very much an ecological poem. And I suppose one of the ways I've tried to write about ecology, eco poetry, if you like, is by making it personal and intimate, and drawing on my own need to make a world. But in that poem, yes, I'm trying to recreate the world through their pelts.
Yeah.
It's, which often were removed anyway as trophies.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, the other thing that struck me is, you just have this great ear, I guess is what it used to be called. I don't know if we still call it that. Like there's this a poem you didn't read, I think Papa Petit, or I might be mispronouncing that, but the first two-line stanza: only after you die do I dare open that case I always gazed at when the minutes stun. And I think to me, it's something to do with the way the consonants come together in the first line, the way the assonance functions, the line break, and then the rhythm of when the minutes stung, and even I'm being very nerdy now, like the TS of minutes and the ST of stung. And it's that kind of sensuous texture to the lines which really draws me in. I think I've always been obsessed with that in poems. I think partly because I grew up with a speech impediment and I was sent to some classes to fix that, but also too, as my parents later admitted, make sure I didn't have a stigmatizing South Asian accent. And so I had lots and lots of attention to sounds, sounding things with my mouth and trying to fix the way my tongue moved and everything. So that aspect of your poetry really excites me, especially maybe now I'm in the US and I do miss that kind of texture from some US poetry that I'm reading. That's sorry, that's the question really, isn't it?
Thank you. Thank you for the kind comments. So I find similarly in your work that it's extremely textured, especially with language. I mean, there's a love of language in every line, really, and also, I mean, I didn't really know that much about Sri Lanka, but I've learned ever such a lot from your book, and not just facts, but as I said, that kind of the texture and the atmospheres and the plants and Ganesha, and especially your use of mythology and symbolism. And I actually wonder, like, if you take that poem, Burnt Palmyra, where you speak in the voice of the tree, which is very powerful, and it describes itself as a voiceless lingam. So, it's like you're making symbols, and I wonder if you are conscious about symbol making or myth making as you're writing.
Oh, that's a good question. I've never been asked that. And maybe because until now, it hasn't really been a thing that I was doing. I suppose I am drawn back more and more to Hinduism, or some aspects of Hinduism and Hindu myth these days. And the title of the book, Avidya, comes from a word used in Hinduism and in Buddhism for a kind of ignorance of the non-dual nature of the universe, but a kind of ignorance which for me in the book is also a sort of historical ignorance, or a failure to see how we're connected to each other and so on. I do feel a great pull in this direction, I have to say. My friend Neil Mukherjee said to me, if you go full Hindu, we can't be friends anymore. So, I'm not quite at the stage of, sitting in a field and, contemplating a blade of grass and, but there's a tendency in that direction at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. I suppose another thing I wonder is, because the language is very beautiful and textured, and your rhythms as well, and your use of form. So are you consciously looking for ways to write about traumatic national events, for example, in a way that has a secret pleasurableness.
That's a good question too. I think that there is this argument that's been made by many people, like my old tutor at Oxford, Tom Paulin, has made it. You know, you write about atrocities in a kind of punitive, bare bones style. That there is something wrong with writing about it in a beautiful way. And I see the force of that argument, but I am also drawn to poets like, say, Agha Shahid Ali, and he comes out of a tradition of writing intensely political poetry, but without feeling that that must necessarily mean a poetry that has repudiated the aesthetic, you know, the aesthetics of it. That actually, you know, in that tradition, and he's drawing on the tradition of the ghazal and all sorts, those things can live together. And I've never really solved it in my head, but it's something I'm inside all the time. I'm trying to think about it.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, that also takes me back to Benjamin Zephaniah, really, that every performance of his and every encounter with the children and sitting with his mother is joyful, you know, and he does manage, even when he's writing about Stephen Lawrence, you know, he still makes some kind of joyful sounds and visually as well. So I personally, I think that that's important. I think that if you're going to just show horror, that it repels the reader.
Well, I think that it seemed, I mean, it seemed important to him to do his sort of political work. As a first stage, it seemed important to stress that he himself wasn't internally riven, you know, and tortured. You know, like he has this great poem about how he doesn't have an identity crisis. That, you know, he knows perfectly well who he is, and that's what allows him to speak out on behalf of others. So I could kind of see that condition of joy as being a sort of refusal of that tortured image, which sometimes poets are, some kinds of poets are sort of pressed to cultivate it. You know, like you're sort of told there's room for you as a minoritized poet if you're always talking about how you feel torn between East and West or something. And that's something I admire very much in your work too, your multiple heritages, the way these things come together. And you do talk about very painful experiences, and you talk about the pain the planet is in as well. But without this kind of, I don't know how to put it, like this kind of guilt about the poetry side of it, like the feeling that one needs to have a sort of anti-aesthetic or something like that. You know, sort of faith that, you know, you go on writing the poems and you follow your instincts and your ear, but that is still a mode of genuine engagement with the most pressing issues of our time, and also with, you know, the serious suffering that you know you've experienced in your own life.
Yeah.
Not sure I put it very well, but
no, you did. Thank you. So I think what's interesting actually about the three of us is that we all three turned to poetry pretty young and saw it as a way to transform our lives and make them beautiful, as well as capture experience. So, you know, like Benjamin said that, well, he was aged 8, I think. I'm trying to see what note I wrote when he, I think when he first decided to be a poet from the age of 8. And I just love that Bob Marley encouraged him.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful that happened, and that he wanted to hang out with Shelley as well. So yeah. I mean, I was turned on to poetry by Keats when I was a teenager at school. So it was so important. It was just like the world changed when I heard Ode to a Nightingale.
Yeah, and it's Keats for me too, because I was obsessed. think I picked Oscar Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray off my parents' shelf. I started reading it. But then because Wilde was so fascinated by Keats, he returns to Keats over and over again. It was Keats that was this sort of poetry awakening for me too. Now I actually teach our Keats course at Harvard, and that's very, very strange.
Oh,
So I've come to that point. But and I don't think it was quite as early as 8 for me, but I think it was more in adolescence. It was like Keats and adolescence, and he is sometimes, related to that, like the adolescent mind, Keats. But to me, there's a lot of really good things about the adolescent mind too. It's concern for justice, it's an intensity, it's passion. I mean, I say that when my son gets older, I'll probably think, I hate the adolescent. It's nauseating. But yes, I think that coming to poetry very early, knowing poetry really doing something for you in your own life, and then that kind of makes you want to help other people have that experience too. And it suggests a kind of use for poetry where poetry is a kind of critique, and it is a poetry of witness, and that was very important in the Sri Lanka anthology. But it also gives people something, like it sort of nourishes them and it heartens them and it recharges them so that they can live in a world that is full of suffering and inequality and pain and the rest of it. And actually just reading poetry is very important to me, when I'm having a bad time in my life. So,
I need to thank you now. We're about to wind up the event. So thank you very much, Pascale and Vidyan. Before we do, I was wondering if I could throw something at Vidyan, which is to ask him whether he might read As a Child, which is on page 71. Because in the light of what you were saying about your voice and the current situation that we're now in, I just thought that would be a great poem to end on, and also a bit of a lighter poem, but also a very pertinent poem.
Yeah, thank you. So I actually wrote this poem quite a long time ago, and it's about traveling to the US, in the post 9/11 climate. George Bush was in power, George W. Bush. But it didn't fit in my previous book, which was a collection of sonnets to my wife. So it kind of stuck around, but now it seems to belong in this book. So it's called As a Child. As a child, because my voice was not the right voice and could not be understood, I stood before the mirror, a murky glassen word this mouth can't shape right to this day, and was made to watch my teeth and lips being imprecise. So this is why I come across a Southern and not from Yorkshire or Sri Lankan, but I'll complain no more about this clarified and potent tongue. But when the mustached gent at US Customs asked me in his hapless twang, "Are you a terrorist?" my borrowed posh, it sure abashed that poor colonial, and it was, of course, what my child face perceived or could not in the glass, which made of me a scrutineer of sound, a listener for and into every glitch in the Artman, the script, the avid void of English. Thanks, Neil. I think I got Southern there, actually, with Basil Bunting. Basil Bunting, who talks about Southern.
It does, yeah. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for watching. I do encourage you to order the books. If you scroll down on the YouTube screen, you can see links. You can buy the books direct from Bloodaxe. They're not available from other online sellers or from bookshops until Thursday. And this is your chance to help a small publisher by ordering from us and not from Amazon. So thank you very much. And I will just pay tribute to Benjamin. And I'm afraid we now need to say goodbye and thank you, everyone.